Hi, this is Stuart Chapman here, and I'm just going to take you through my response to the Evidence of Learning 2 for the OTTP programme, which is to chat about issues emerging that are relating to digital teaching and learning. So I'm going to start off talking about digital literacy. First of all, this kind of affects quite a few groups, but the ones that I've sort of chosen to focus on are teachers, learners, and parents. So first of all, I wanted to talk about teachers. I think that if you are investing in digital literacy, then you need to make sure that the teachers are on board and are able to kind of deliver using new technologies. So issues that kind of relate to that, I suppose, are first of all the lack of confidence in using new technologies. This could be for a lot of reasons. Sometimes people won't have the training. Sometimes people have a bit of a kind of a fear, if you like, of using new technologies, and it can be quite scary, I think. So if you're unable to get that training and that support that you need, then it's highly unlikely that you're going to be very confident in teaching a class where you're using new and emerging digital technologies. So on the back of that, of course, is that the lack of time available to teachers these days in which to attain those sort of new skills, really. I myself know that I'm very, very pushed for time. As well as the contact hours that I do, I get a certain amount of time to prepare and plan and to mark and the rest of it, and it is very, very tight for all of us to kind of invest that time, if you like, to attain those new skills. I do, try to make time for it where I can, but I suppose you can't be the only person that's going to sort of be delivering using sort of digital and emerging technologies. If you want to make an impact, I suppose you need to have everybody else sort of department-wide and college-wide on board. There's the lack of time thing that is very much an issue. Also, the absence of what I might call a shared vision between teaching and management staff of how digital technologies are expected to be used. A lot of people think, well, yeah, it's all very well and good that we're going to be using these technologies, but what impact are they going to have? How do we use them? What do we use? When do we use them? And sometimes if there isn't that kind of communication between teaching staff and management staff, then again, it can have a profound effect on teachers kind of wanting to use that technology. I suppose a simple factor is guidance, really. The sort of investment, if you like, of the teachers in kind of looking at how those technologies are going to be used would certainly encourage the use of digital technology, emerging technologies in the classroom. I've also got reluctance to change their own teaching methods. Some teachers are quite happy with the way that they teach, with the methods that they use, and may not want to change, may not want to use different methods if they see that their own methods are effective. I can see two sides to this. I can obviously see the fact that if a teacher says, well, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. But also on the other side of that is the fact that the world is changing, and more institutions are kind of getting on board with the use of emerging technologies, and you don't want to be left behind with that. Also, and this is kind of piggybacking actually onto effect on the learners as well. It could affect the learners by them being disengaged using the same teaching methods all the time. Obviously, a bit of variety would tend to be a little bit more engaging for the learner. So moving on to the learners then, the effect that it could have, or I suppose negative effects or issues that it could have on learners are, first of all, disengagement with the same teaching methods as I've just talked about there, a lack of independence in the classroom. In the department that I work in, sometimes learners can become reliant on getting help, and I think it can be very, very difficult sometimes to kind of get out of that rut if you have that sort of, I suppose, what you could term learned helplessness. I think using digital technology in the classroom is a way of encouraging that independence. If by doing it with very small steps to begin with, then perhaps as those steps are taken, the support is kind of taken away a little bit more. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about solutions to that in a bit. So some learners could be more tech savvy than others. That is an issue that could arise. It has arisen, in fact, for me this year. I've managed to find some solutions along the lines in that, actually, with one of them being that I had a learner who was very savvy using Photoshop, and I got him to teach a class of my learners and show off his Photoshop skills, which proved to be a really beneficial and effective thing for him, in that he was sharing his knowledge, and he had to sort of think about how he would clarify what was being said. But also, I think it was really great for his peers to learn from him, as opposed to learning from me or from a member of support staff. So I've also got a failure to make a connection between technology and learning. This is kind of funny, because sometimes you'll tend to find a lot of our learners spend a lot of time on the phones, on the mobile phones especially, on the tablets as well, and a lot of them can kind of fail to make that connection, if you like, between the fact that it's a tool for learning. Obviously, a lot of it is used for sort of social networking these days, but I think the potential for using mobile devices or tablets, for example, in the classroom is not wholly appreciated or wholly seen by learners, and this could be a significant breakthrough, I think, if they are able to see that connection between using their technology, their devices, and learning, of which I will speak also in a bit. So finally, I'm going to talk about the effect on parents. I looked into social mobility a little bit, and how that could affect a learner's engagement. So, for example, a household maybe not having a computer or a device or an internet connection. So I actually managed to find some quite refreshing figures in that, compared to computer ownership, sort of say 10 years ago, which was, I think, 67% in 2007. So 67% of households in the UK owned a computer, and 61% had a Wi-Fi connection or an internet connection, sorry. So compared to that, in 2007, now in 2017, have no figures for 2018 yet, 90% of UK households now have an internet connection, and 88% of that make up computer ownership as well. So that's quite a staggering figure, and quite an indicator of how far we've come when it comes to kind of embracing digital technology and the whole idea of digital citizenship. So moving on, another factor that I want to talk about was limited budgets. So with regards to limited budgets, particularly on institutions, so I decided to kind of list what the causes of a limited budget might be. So, for example, a lack of any sort of quality training, sort of going from the top down, so from management to support staff, to IT support system support staff, able to then kind of dispense that knowledge throughout the infrastructure of the institution. Also, limited budget would mean, a lack of equipment. So, you may be the opportunities to access that equipment would be far lower on a limited with an institution on a limited budget. Again, the same thing with the lack of software as well, and on top of that, the maintenance of the equipment as well would, prove to be quite difficult on a limited budget as well. So there's that. I want to talk a little bit about software issues as well. So other issues that might kind of relate to digital teaching and learning are continual updates of software. So, for example, I have actually been a victim of this myself when using iMovie. So iMovie I found to be a really kind of user-friendly and quite intuitive video editing program that I could, teach quite a lot of learners to use, and they could pick it up quite quickly. So Apple, in their infinite wisdom, decided to update iMovie, so the interface was completely different. Unfortunately, it didn't come with an instruction manual or any training, so it then became kind of quite difficult to. I had to sort of relearn it, reteach myself, and as a result of that, I think my learners' progress kind of suffered, because I then had to kind of show them again how to do it. So that was a bit of a pain and a bit difficult. Also. Another issue kind of relating to updates as well is that sometimes computers, and quite often it's Microsoft as well, have to kind of do an update, and if you don't kind of address the update there and then sometimes it just decides that it wants to do it at a certain point. This can really affect you if you're using sort of IT within a session, and then all of a sudden the computer decides to update itself. So that's something that you've got to be mindful of as well, are the updates, the software updates. So another issue I've got here is the unfamiliarity of the appropriate software. What I mean by that is knowing which software you want to use, really, knowing which software would be effective for you, knowing what would be what would be an effective piece of software to use in the classroom, I suppose. Software issues. Unfamiliarity of the appropriate software I've got down here. What I mean by that is sometimes you're not entirely certain exactly what software you want to use, or some people might not be entirely aware of which software that they want to use, which software would be effective for learning in the classroom, and this can take up quite a bit of time researching what you need. Obviously, a collaborative approach would be really helpful there. Certainly, with other teachers in the same institution as you, but perhaps a setting up of some sort of forum might be useful to discuss how effective software is, whether it's any good, whether it's worth getting. Finally, the last thing that I was going to talk about on the software front is the overuse of the same software. Saturation, you might call it. So again, this could kind of affect, going back to the learner, the effect on the learner again, this could kind of affect the disengagement with the same teaching methods. I think it's really important to be aware that if you are using particular softwares, that not all of your colleagues who are teaching the same learners are also using it. Again, it would kind of begin to be a bit disengaging, I think, for the learner, should they just be continually using the same software over and over again. I think, again, variety is important, and that kind of innovation, thinking innovatively to kind of broaden your horizons, really, and make sure that you're fully committed to being a digital citizen. I'm going to talk now about inadequate systems. Inadequate systems. I'm going to talk now about inadequate systems infrastructure. So, first of all, I'm going to talk about connectivity issues. I have actually had quite a few issues with this in the past. They are beginning to improve, which is always good. Obviously, it can be really frustrating, especially if you're using sort of Wi-Fi devices that rely on a strong Wi-Fi connection, and that connection is then kind of not forthcoming. That can be a little bit frustrating, both for yourself and for the learner as well. It can certainly hold up the learning time. That said, it is improving, and I'm finding that more and more of the apps that I use, particularly with the iPads, can be better accessed now through a much more improved Wi-Fi system. I've also put vulnerability to system breach. For example, hackers. We actually have had an issue with this very recently within the college, in that we were working on a very sort of limited system due to the fact that some outside source had been hacking, breaching the system somehow, which again makes it very, very difficult to kind of be effective with your teaching with technology. So that's a big difficulty. As per a solution to that, I'm not entirely certain how one goes about that. I suppose you have faith in your IT IT department, making sure that they are kind of on top of these things, and that there's constant communication between you and them, or between them and the college, to let you know how the connectivity is within your infrastructure, I suppose. So finally, I've put, talking about inadequate systems infrastructure, I've talked a little bit about teachers having a lack of confidence in using new technologies, and so I've put, with the inadequate systems infrastructure, I've put lack of technological support. So obviously, when things go wrong, and inevitably they do, you want to be sure that when they do go wrong, that you are kind of covered, and that you've got somebody to come along and support you. I have to say that within this institution, it's actually the support network that we have here is pretty good as far as IT goes. The response time is very quick, and 9 times out of 10 they will get a fix on your problem almost immediately. So very little teaching time is sort of taken up by mishaps like that. That said, if there isn't any technological support within that infrastructure, then and you are heavily reliant on using technology, then it could be a very serious issue for you, and impact greatly on yourself, your teaching, and your learners as well. So effects on parents. I've talked about social mobility. Also, kind of lack of confidence in their own abilities to use technology could mean that they're reluctant or unable to help their child with any college work that they might be given. So I think, you know, it's vitally important as well that parents are sort of committed really to becoming a bit more technology literate, if that's a term. It is now. So I think, you know, perhaps that would be an excellent way with which learners could actually teach the parents as well. So that would be a nice solution to an issue. So that would be a nice solution to the issue. Right, so finally, lack of engagement with technology could mean that parents miss out on vital communications with tutor/institution. I am aware, I think, that, you know, a lot of communication is also done by telephone, but more and more institutions are relying on communication via email, sometimes by text message as well. And again, if a parent is kind of reluctant to engage with technology, then perhaps they might miss out on vital communications, which could ultimately, you know, have serious implications, especially if it was due to a learner being at risk on a course. Okay, so I think that's it for now. I have a little bit more to talk about with connecting different pedagogies as well. But for now, I think the issues emerging relating to digital teaching and learning are kind of covered. So thank you very much for listening.